Hello and welcome to Find Your Freedom, a podcast dedicated to helping you truly find freedom in all aspects of life. Join your hosts and their expert guests as they share practical tips and strategies for finding more freedom in your life. It's time to take control of your life and create the future you want. Let's find your freedom. Here are your hosts, Lenny the Boss and Omid Rad Investor.
Boom, boom, boom. We are back with another fantastic episode of Find Your Freedom. And we have an amazing guest. But before we get into that, I have a question for you. Are you in the market for buying a house, maybe a personal home or a short-term rental or even a long-term rental, and you need a lender? Well, guess what? Wealth Builders, who is sponsoring this episode today, Wealth Builders Mortgage Group, is the group for you. So check them out. We have everything you need in the show notes, and Parker team will 100% take care of you. Remember, Wealth Builders Mortgage Group, check them out if you are in the market of buying a personal home or a rental property. So with that being said, man, today is going to be a cool episode because who we have today, which is Jim, he has this huge background, but in real estate. But honestly, I want to talk about another piece that he really got going on here. And it's really about how you tie in being an entrepreneur and also tie in taking care of your family at the same time. He's a bestseller, right? He has this book called The Family Board Meeting, which we're going to get into that. Really looking to hear about that. He also has a pretty cool podcast, so check it out, called 18 Summer. So we're going to be looking to get into that as well. So Jim, how you doing today, brother?
Lenny, good. Amit, good to see you guys.
Awesome. So Jim, let me ask you. So if you don't mind, can you just give our audience a little background on yourself?
Yeah, been a real estate investor for 24 years, almost 25 years now, and also started a family education company about 12 years ago because I saw a big gap in the needs and in the market for not only real estate investors, but entrepreneurs, professionals, where they were succeeding in business but failing at home. And that scared me. So I tried to come up with some simple concepts and strategies that seemed to be working for me and share them. And they took off very unexpectedly. And here we are today, an unexpected real estate investor, not a family therapist, not a psychologist, with a best-selling Wall Street Journal best-selling family book, which I'd like to say, guys, I think it's because I'm such a great writer, but I don't think I am. I think it's the subject. It's the subject. That's why the book did well, because everyone can relate to this. Well, I want to be successful in business and successful at home. And, it's a fear of all of us that, you get to the end of your children's 18 summers and you've missed it. And that time doesn't come back. Time is fleeting. The years are not all created equal. So how do we keep that, make sure our family doesn't get left behind when we're pursuing our entrepreneurial pursuits? I've really gotten fascinated with that because I see that there's some clear patterns that can be followed to avoid that issue, or ones that will just drive you right into some really big levels of pain and regret that I've seen working with, thousands of families now over the last 12 years.
So I want to touch on that because I think that is a super interesting topic, because typically it's you have a certain personality type that's ambitious, that wants to do really well, but with that comes a lot of sacrifice, and it really is kind of like a team effort where there has to be communication between you and your spouse or family as far as who plays what role. And I think that's where there's a lot of breakdown of communication, or you're supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, and finger pointing happens, and often you see failures in either you scaling down on the business side, or scaling down on, or trying to fit in more as much time in the family side. So maybe what are some the biggest obstacles that you've seen, and what's an example of ways to kind of overcome those, as an entrepreneur or as a business professional?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I see is just throwing your hands in the air and saying, "Oh, this can't be fixed." I'm a workaholic. There's nothing that can be done. I'm better off not at home. I'll just provide some capital to the family life, and they really beat themselves up. And the thing that I kind of start with, Ahmed, is I am now in over a decade working with thousands of family, have not seen one perfect family, not one. And we all say, oh, I want to have the perfect family life. I want to have the perfect marriage. Man, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure, not just to put on yourself, but on your spouse, on your children. Hey, we're gonna have the perfect family life. Oh man, I don't know about you guys, but my grades in school were nowhere close to perfect. So I know perfection all sort. I mean, there's no way. So I always try to reframe people of saying, stop trying to have the perfect family. And I say it's not about perfection, it's about bridging imperfections. And once you start to do that, then you start to kind of lower your guard. There's a little bit of a little more relaxation. It's not like you're trying to drive 80 miles an hour with your face against the windshield, get here faster, faster. And that's what it can feel like when we're trying to overachieve in family life. The other thing that I can see too is working hard in a business does not, there's something that I, excuse me, coined entrepreneurial immunity. And I saw it really bad in the pandemic. I mean, and everything I talk about, I've suffered from. So you guys know it's not like, oh yeah, I've never done this. This is, I'm talking from the observatory, level. No, I've been in the trenches and done all these mistakes. That's why you end up teaching stuff you've been involved with, but make mistakes on. But we give ourselves entrepreneurial immunity. And we start to say, well, you have any idea? I was in the pandemic. I held together two businesses, that gives me the right to be short, impatient, break promises, be a little rude, roll over your spouse or your kids. It's a very dangerous, sometimes unconscious programming that we put in. Look, providing is important, no doubt about it. But when we give ourselves immunity from keeping promises, basic respect, quality time with our families, it comes out in uglier ways down the road. And that's something that I tell people to don't give yourself immunity, don't expect perfection, and you might not be the solutions don't have to be as complicated as we made the problem. So many things can happen just putting a few things in place, which I'm sure we'll go over today, to get you. I mean, it's not going to get you all the way there, but man, when you get 70-80% more of the way there, right, you're going to be better off. And that's where I like people to say, you're not too far off. It's not about perfection. Don't give yourself immunity. Let's try to put a few things into the rotation and see what happens. Use it as an experiment and let's see what happens. And that's kind of the approach I take working with families.
Interesting. So, Jim, let me ask you a question because what I have noticed, and obviously you spoke to way more family than I have, but what I have noticed is people tend to find out that it's a problem after everything starts to fall apart. So, while they're in the mix, they think they're doing the right thing, right? They, by they're working 1 billion hours in one day, they think that that's the right thing to do
Yeah.
until things start falling apart. So, what are the techniques or what are the things that people either should look out for to know that you're not doing the right thing, even though you think you are? Or are there things that they should just do, kind of like to make sure that they don't have those things that fall apart because your kids don't start screaming until after you miss 30 practices, right? Your wife don't start screaming until after 30 events done occurred. And about that time it's over. Like, so how can they see it or prevent it or any of those things?
There's a couple ways, and it's good. You've obviously spoken to a decent amount of families, Lenny, that you see that because this is a problem. There's this entrepreneurial mountain I talk about. We start to run up it hard, fast, dedicated, with the best intentions, and then you finally stop and look around, like consciously look around, and maybe a few years have gone by, and what happens is sometimes, yeah, a person loses their family, the family's gone, but not to scare anyone, that's not the most common. The most common, what I see, is the family is still there. But if you really had to take inventory and be honest, you've gotten to the point where your family views you as a stranger. You are like you're like you own a couple of part-time roles, like you're a part-time disciplinarian, you're a roommate, possibly just to your spouse, you're an ATM machine. Those things are, and you're like, man, that kind of cuts to it. And again, I've felt all these ways, and it's self-inflicted. And when those types of things happen, like interviewing, you start to feel guilty, depressed, and bitter. And so there's that famous book, The Body Keeps the Score. If you're starting to feel those ways, make sure it's not just the stress of work, but you're missing out. Gosh, I've delegated myself out of family life. I'm missing it, and I'm not being there. I'm giving myself immunity, so when I'm around, I'm impatient and grumpy. Um, those things don't have to happen. That's the good thing. And so we can go over a couple of principles that are a starting point to help. Because look, guys, the one thing I can tell you, I'm the last person to take away ambition. Like I run 2 different companies. I have 5 children. I'm an avid adventurer with them. I'm a surfer. I have ambition and adventure in me, but I've learned there's what I've tried. You know that story, guys, when you're walking across the mountain ravine on one of those like wooden bridges. You ever seen that thing? Well, on the side is always the guardrails, right? Like, and I always say how many of you want to walk across one of those mountain ravines on one of those little wooden bridges without guardrails on the side? And they're all like, hell no, I want my guardrails up, right? So these are like strategies and guardrails. So I'll give you guys 3 that my book is based on that I think
let's do it.
Really capture quality time. Because this is about quality time, because you gotta really figure out what is quality time, how do I achieve it? Because you don't have all the time in the world, right? Not if you're going to keep this balance of I want to be with my family, but I want to provide a life that I know for me, like that my parents could never provide for us. They struggle with money their entire life. They couldn't provide it as much. So I want to have the free time, but also the financial freedom to have that life. So there is some trade-off on that. So what do I do? So there's a couple of principles I can share with you. The first one, and did you guys, I don't know if you have anything to add on that or if you
Oh
disagree.
no, man, keep rolling. Let's get these
No,
principles
this is
out.
great. No,
They
I'm
need to
loving it.
hear
So,
this.
yeah.
Here's principle 1. Let's
Yes,
go
Yeah.
with principle 1.
this is principle 1.
We're students just as much as we're here to learn and
Absolutely.
share this
We
with
all
others
are.
as well.
All of us are. So
Yeah.
principle number 1. This one is the most overlooked, yet one of the most potent that you can get involved in. It's a shame that it's not talked about more, especially when it comes to family life or close relationships. But this has been one of the most powerful ones. I always tell people, all right, if you don't listen to anything else today, just walk away with this one thing, because then they'll come back to you and be like, oh, Lenny Ahmed, I did this and it changed everything. And that's the 1-to-1 principle. You gotta separate the parts to strengthen the whole. This is absolutely key. And it's really a shame that it's not discussed more by therapists or psychologists. And these guys are great. And I'm not trying to bag on them, but this has been such a powerful principle I had to uncover for myself. And it's about putting the magnifying glass on each relationship in your family in a positive way. Again, separate the parts, you will strengthen the whole. 1-to-1 time has developed a relationship between me and each one of my children without the Jan Brady syndrome. Remember that Marsha, right? None of us want that middle child syndrome that we're dealing with. It takes away distraction, right? If you're always with someone else, or let's say you guys are like me, and my wife, I believe, is a way better communicator than me, way better, conversationalist, gabber with my children. If you're always leaning on your spouse and she's always there, well, you can be stoic and quiet in the corner. If you're one-on-one with each of your children, you can't hide behind your wife. You can't behind another sibling or a best friend. I mean, I know with my own parents, I didn't start hanging out with my father, and that's a whole nother story about it, one-on-one till much later in life. And he was stoic. He was quiet. My mom would be like, and that's great. She'd keep the conversation going, but you don't get to know the person. And so for me, it absolutely changed the relationship I had with each one of my children. It made me understand their individual talents, interests, fears. It gave them the ultimate respect. Like I come from a large Irish Catholic family, which means I have like 4,000 cousins, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous how many. And that's great, but it's not in those times of these big celebrations that a lot of the connection or conversation below the surface happens. And now I've gotten thousands of conversations, emails, posts from our book saying, "Man, getting one on one with my son or my daughter, I couldn't believe what they ended up talking to me about."
So Jim, real quick, let me jump in there. So,
Sure.
I just wanted to be clear. So when you say one on one, like, people, like you said, hey, you got multiple companies that you're running, right? Ton of responsibility, and the average person probably got two kids, right? you know and a spouse, because we're saying one on one regardless you a man or a woman, right? So let's just go with the average family, right?
Yeah,
You
let's do it.
got a job, you got a side job that you're trying to grow to become your new job, right? You also have a spouse, and you have two kids that are pretty demanding. You got one daughter that's in gymnastics, you got the other kid that's in sports in every game. So when you say one on one, like, do you suggest that people should kind of book a time with their kid of saying, hey, every Friday we're going to, Joe, we're going to go out, or we're going to spend time Friday at 5, and Susan, we're going to spend time on Tuesdays at 6. Like, is that the way you suggest to go about it?
Little different. Let me tell you what I do. And this is in my book. So there's two things. With my spouse, every week. Every week we have date night. Every Wednesday, 5:30 to 8:30. Every Wednesday, 5:30 to 8:30. Hey, I'm really glad I'm on your podcast, guys. But if you were like, hey Jim, we only got one slot in the next 6 months, and it's Wednesday at 6 o'clock, I'd be like, okay, guys, we'll see you in 6 months. Like it takes a lot for me to break date night on my wife.
So,
It's
Jim,
that
you trying to
same.
tell me you won't have date night, bring her on here, and
Yeah,
have
oh,
her on the podcast? Is that what you
that's
saying, Jim?
we're getting into principle number 2 now, and you're gonna see what an idiot I made of myself of something that saved me from that. But yeah, with my wife every week, same bat time, same bat channel. We have the babysitter every Wednesday night. It's just her and I for 3 hours. Really important. With my children, I spend a half day to a day every quarter, one on one,
Hmm.
planned on my schedule. Sometimes it's on a weekend. Sometimes we play hooky from school and work, and we're spending the day just one on one. And let me tell you, now that I have kids is ranging from 2 to 20, and my 18-year-old, my 20-year-old have said what a difference those days have made in their life for their pursuits, how they kept a straight line, just the breakthroughs that we had. And this is all in my book. But that's what I do. You know, for companies, right? The more entrepreneurial companies, when you hear about quarterly board meetings, right? That's where I got the idea. What do you do at a quarterly board meeting? Let's say for your whole podcast thing. Well, you get the team together every quarter to review the last quarter and reground and look ahead to the next 90 days, right? That's what I do with my children. I say, hey, we call them board meetings. We're gonna have a board meeting. You know, my 7-year-old's planning his next one to the alligator farm, and it's just going to be him and I. And he's putting the whole day together, and we'll go through that. And that's what I'm talking about. Once a week with my wife, a day every quarter. And people are like, oh, is that the only time that you spend with your children? I said, no, but I have 5 kids and I run 2 businesses, and we do a lot of stuff together.
Right,
But it's that
right.
one-on-one time. Like, children really, really excel in this. My 7-year-old's got a very different conversation than my 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that's a good thing.
Yes.
Right. And but that when you have that day, and again, it's at least 4 hours, at least 4 to 5 hours, or the whole day, they don't forget this. It's not like Lenny, a rush thing. Hey, let's go grab a coffee for a half hour. Now, that's great. Don't get me wrong. You can do
Yeah.
that. You should do that. But these days go really deep. I mean, really deep. They pick the day, they pick the event. I
Mm.
go all in. You almost feel like, why have I not been doing this forever? Same thing with my spouse. You know, that date night, it is a reset. And we've gone through some big things in our life, health challenges to family tragedies to entrepreneurial setbacks. And that is like a sacred time where we reground. My wife will even joke on our podcast. There's times I didn't feel like going out on date night with him. But man, I'm so glad we did because once we did, I was like, that's why I love him. That's why we love each other. And we've both been there. So we hold this time sacred, and that's
Mhm.
key. And that brings us into principle number 2, guys.
Let's do it.
This is
Principle
absolutely
number
key.
2. Let's do it, man.
Yeah, 1-to-1, separate the parts, strengthen the whole. Each of your family members, absolutely key. Maybe some people close to you. Second thing, this is absolutely key to making it potent and not ruining it. It's a term we coined a few years ago called intermittent tech fasting. Intermittent tech fasting. So you guys look like you're pretty fit. So you've heard of intermittent fasting, right? So you're
Yep.
not giving up eating. You're saying, as intermittent fasting, they say it's good for weight maintenance, muscle tone, organ revitalization, like all sorts of things, better sleep, whatever. You're not giving up eating when you're doing intermittent fasting. You're just saying, I'm only going to eat between this time and this time, right? You guys have heard of that?
Yes.
Yep.
Same thing with technology. You got to
Interesting.
have times of complete and total unavailability. And that's something that it goes against the badge of honor that Lenny, I think you were talking about in the beginning. Like, I'm building this, I'm doing this, like I'm always on call. You can get me 24/7. That sounds great. But now what if you want to have a strong family life? You have to be able to shut off. So guys, I feel zero guilt when I turn off that phone 5:30 to 8:30 every Wednesday for my wife. I turn off my phone 2 hours at the end of every workday for just home life, right? We have something called the dinner time challenge where everyone's phones are off for at least an hour a day at the same time, so we don't get that interrupting conversation. I mean, can you imagine with one of your children going on this day, they're going through a really hard patch, and all of a sudden, yeah, we're going to do what you want to do, but you're always picking up a text or a phone call or a useless
Yep.
Facebook thread.
Yep.
First of all, you're saying this is more important than you. And why would they open up then? These things are wonderful. I mean, you guys are having a great conversation, but we have to have times where we're not on them. They're not available to be in between us. And when you combine this with spending one-on-one time together, it is, you almost will feel like, do you guys remember the first Spider-Man was Tobey Maguire?
Yep.
The big ass bully was walking up about to punch him, and he's go, and Toby is so aware. He's like, dang, he just kind of dodges the
Yeah.
punch, looks
Yeah.
around, and I mean, he's so far ahead. That's how you feel after you spend a date night with your wife. Where your phone's been off, you've given her full focus. No one's been able to text you, call you, email you, Facebook you. Same thing with your kids. And you're like, holy shit, 5 hours? I'm going to turn off my phone for 5 hours. My business is going to blow up. In all of this, and we figure there's about 300,000 families using our family board meeting strategy now. No one has written to me and said, you were wrong, Jim. My business blew up that day. I turned off my phone for 5. Not one person. I always say it.
Right.
So this is what you have to look for. And Lenny, I made that mistake. Like, I was the dummy that when we finally got date night set, and we my wife and I do this whole class on this, I'd be the idiot picking up his phone, doing a text, looking at Facebook. I mean, you want to talk about anti-romance? It was horrible. And you don't figure, we don't figure how sloppy we get, and a little bit of separation. So again, I just believe in intermittent tech fasting. Use it to your advantage, but have times when you're completely off of it, especially when you're in these, connection times with the people you love the most.
All right. Can I share something, Jim? So,
Yeah.
this is amazing. So for the audience, if you don't have your pen and pad out right now, I hate to say it, and I never call nobody this, but you are absolutely a fool if you're not sitting here taking down these principles. And so, Jim, I'm proud to say for the date night, I do something a little different with my wife.
Yeah.
So what we do is we take it back to when we were 18, 17, 16, right? And we like to sit here and text each other, right? When you were 16, you say, oh, you tell your buddy, I'm gonna text this girl to see, if she can go out to lunch or something like that. So we do things like that. So we call it pop-up lunches. Right. So one of us can text each other and say, hey, what's your day looking like? Let's go to lunch. And we go to any place. Like, it can be a hole in the wall or a nice place. Doesn't matter. It just falls back on kind of what you meant. Now, for this tech fasting, it's interesting because I actually teach people to do this to be productive, but I don't teach them to do it with their family. So I tell them, hey, do the 50 and 10, right? 50 minutes, you're just doing your work, right? And then spend 10 minutes after that surfing social or answering emails or calling people back, texts or whatever. But yeah, so it's pretty interesting. But go ahead. I don't want to stop. I just kind of want to.
No, Lenny, you're doing, look, and that's great. And I love how, again, this is a buffet. take what you want, leave the rest, right? You don't, it's not do everything exactly the word. Well, I go out with my kids once a quarter. I call it this. I don't care what you call it or the exact things, just there's overlap of principles. And I love how you and your wife, first of all, have such a deep history, long history together, and you set these impromptu lunches. I think that's great. I think that's incredible. What I would encourage you now is like be braggadocious now. Get to that lunch and be like, check it out. And turn your phone on and be like, I don't want anyone bothering me while I'm right here with you.
You
And
got
she's
it.
gonna be like, damn, this guy is into me. You know? So yeah, so that see, and that's what it's about. It's just we don't want to get interrupted. So you can see how technology is such a beautiful thing and how it can line things up. But in the most opportune moments, I can't tell you guys how many times with like retreats that we've hosted, and it's parents and teens where when the teens have gotten into the most kind of that side path. I know with one of my sons who started to take they said, you just seem so busy. I didn't want to bother you because I know how hard you worked. And that's like, wow, we don't want to, because sometimes like we're all big boys here. We can all admit sometimes we definitely don't need to be on our phone. And if we're always looking like we're busy, I mean, I talk about in my book a story where my daughter, I came home again, like I told you guys, I turned my phone off. I forgot I left it in my pocket. I got on the trampoline with her. She asked me to go on the trampoline. She's 9 now. She was 5 at the time. I pulled it, I get that zzz, 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 zzz. I pull the phone out of my pocket. Someone screwed up a closing. It was this simple thing that had to get in. It's now 5:30. The title company's closed. I'm swearing under my breath. I'm like trying to figure it out. I've left the trampoline mentally. I look down and my daughter has got the little quiver lip. You know what I mean? And I think maybe she's fallen, or I'm like, sweetie, what's wrong? She just said, oh, Daddy, why are you so mad at me? And so here I am working a real estate deal in my head in
Wow.
front of her. And I was like,
Wow.
jeez. And I just showed this is where I'm not good enough. I work too fast. I'm a very hard worker. I'm very ambitious. I'm very ADD. So that doesn't help. So I know that this is to protect you from yourself. Like I talked about, guys, guardrails. You start to use this intermittent tech fasting where you're like, yeah, we're not going to have phones at meals. Yeah, our date night, my phone might get us here, but it's not going to be on because I'm not going to disrespect you taking a text or a phone call. It can wait. And there is some power to that of saying that. So those are the first two principles. It's one-to-one intermittent tech fasting. And then, once you've scheduled the time, and I do want to say with it overlapping, that's what we schedule gets done, guys. These days that I get with my children, this date night, if you don't schedule it, that's like saying, oh yeah, I got a huge investor, he invests like $2 million a year into our projects. You don't ever schedule time to follow up with them, talk to them, tour, whatever. That'd be insane. So like you said, the 50-10 is great for productivity with your business. Scheduling would be impossible for a business. So I do the same thing with family. It's not impersonal. It actually, I think it ups connection. So we schedule it. And that leaves you with the third principle, guys. And the third principle is saying the unspoken. This is really important because I can tell you when we do these one-on-one days with my children, they choose the day, I go all in. It's not about what I want to do. It's not. I'm like my oldest son, who now is a professional fisherman, has his own charter fishing business. We used to go fishing all the time. Now, if I have my choice between fishing or surfing, I will choose surfing 10 out of 10 times. I like to fish, but I'm a surfer. And
Yeah.
so, but it wasn't about me. And he got to uncover his talents, and we'd go fishing, and I got even more into it to watch how excited he was. Now he's professional fisherman. I'm not going to say it's that straight a line, but that's the difference it made for us. I let them choose the day. We go all in. My phone is off. I've given full one-on-one attention. After a few hours, you really start to feel this decompression, right? You will feel it. It's like, when we're all overwhelmed and feeling too up here, and it brings you back to the ground. And at these times, you've usually done a fun event, maybe had a meal together. You have a golden opportunity where there is true connection, there is focus, and a lot of kids. And again, I've had the privilege of working with so many families now. A lot of kids out there are starving for two things, and spouses, and that's a sincere apology or a genuine compliment. We're all always moving so fast. And like I said, we can give ourselves immunity and just run over it and then not go back to it. We can go back to, it takes a lot of, I think, courage and manhood to go back to a 6-year-old that you could just run over and say, well, I'm the boss of the house, deal with it. Even though you know
Wow.
you were being a total prick, pardon my French, and you say, hey, you know what? Last week I was really short. There was a lot of stress at work, and I think I was short and impatient with you. I'm sorry. Guys, I can't tell you how far that goes. Or, we can our loved ones cannot hear what we think. And being ADD and stuff, I don't know about you guys, and this isn't just for us ADD people. I'll do this in front of crowds of very successful people. I'm like, how many of you have thought you've had a real conversation out loud and your spouse, your child said, what? No, we never talked about. What are you talking about? It's like went on in your head. We are, and sometimes we move so fast, we think this happened. So we think we've given the compliment and we haven't. And I actually do this whole thing on how to give a sincere compliment, or a sincere apology. But most children are looking for these two things. Most spouses are looking for these things. Like if I have to travel some for work, to come back to my wife and say, man, you are holding down the fort with all 5 kids, the extra business thing, relatives coming into town, friends that stop by, you're fostering 3 kittens for the Humane Society. Like, thanks for keeping this all together. Like, I know I'm not always here, and I just really appreciate it. Thank you. We forget to say these things. And when we schedule this one-on-one time, guys, it slows us down, it decompresses us, and it gives us that opportunity where it can be heard, it can be received, and we feel so much better. I got to tell you, Ahmed, you had something to say on that.
No, no, I was gonna just like compliment Lenny. I think Lenny is like really good with sustaining relationships long term. And I think like one of his gifts is, he uses a lot of kind words, and I think I think this like principle would be like one of his strengths, like just saying the unspoken. And I think we go to a lot of like um, events where we're networking, and it's very common where people interact and then you don't ever see them again. But I think one thing that I definitely want to compliment Lenny on is
Oh, thank
he's
you, sir.
able to sustain the relationships beyond the transactional, the one time, by just recognizing the nice things and saying the unspoken things, and kind of continuing the conversation. And so, I mean, I think to your point, I think that skill's so important, in like, in the, at home, and I'd probably have to admit I don't do it enough. And I think that's something that I got to work on myself, because I think, that's super important.
Yeah, well, good on Lenny then, because Lenny, you are a prodigy of not the norm, because it's not easy, or it wasn't for me to give these kind of heartfelt compliments. It felt weird or awkward or wimpy, and apologizing almost felt like weakness. And I've learned, man, a sincere apology that's
Is amazing.
given quickly and without strings and just completely is so powerful. And because it can take in our some of our marriage workshops, it can keep a 10-minute issue a 10-minute issue instead of a 5-day debacle. Like
Mm.
that's really what a sincere like it can stop things, reset, and put things back on track really quick. And if you don't, man, and you're holding yourself up for, I get it. Entrepreneurship's tough. We got to lower our
Yeah.
guard. And if we say, I'm sorry,
I like
and
that.
let
You're
me,
right.
let me tell you this, here's the funny one, guys. You can't say, oh, well, I'm sorry you were offended by that. Like
That's not a apology.
no backhanded no backhanded apologies. Those go over like, you know what I mean? Oh, not good. It's like, yeah, wearing a bathing suit in winter. That's just not a good mix.
I,
So,
I I I learned that early, that when you use the word "but," you eliminated
everything,
the
yeah,
apology.
everything goes away.
Everything that came before that means nothing,
Yep,
right?
you're absolutely right.
I did these principles. I mean, hey, listen, um, these principles make you a better person.
Yeah.
and it because what happens with these principles is it start to show in other fashions of your life as well. So it start off with, your significant other. It start off with, your kids, and this powerful one saying the unspoken, that start to become who you are.
Mhm.
And then it says, okay, then that goes to, you start saying that to the closest friends that's there to you, right? You start speaking that, and you start speaking, that language. I'm gonna be honest, man. I am super impressed on the wording of how you have these principles labeled here, and obviously you gave some detail to each principle. And I'm hoping for the listeners that they really rewind this part and you really tune in with no distraction
Mhm.
and really understand what is being stated here, because these, I'm gonna use the word simple, right?
You
They're
should.
they're, they're simple, not easy, right? They're simple, not easy, but with, just like with anything, with practice, you become better, and you can sit here and really change your life. I mean, dramatically,
Dude,
So, Jim, I want to thank you big time for sharing those
no
those
problem.
three principles.
No problem. I hope everyone put them to work. Again, this is a cheat sheet. Get one-on-one, intermittent tech fasting, put it to practice, and say the unspoken. I'm not saying that's going to fix all your problems, but
No,
man, you start to do that, like you said, Lenny, rhythmically and on more consistency, it changes. It is the turning of the big ship in the right direction.
So I think you bring, a lot of attention to like the relationships component of like, what matters. And, a lot of people pursue financial freedom or time freedom, but, what are they using it for? And are they sustaining the relationships as they're, pursuing the course? Um, Maybe share a little bit about the 18 summers and like the concept behind that, and how that kind of ties into like the principles. Cause I feel like you start applying the principles and then kind of building with some, 18 summers.
Yeah, well, 18 Summers was a principle one of my mentors taught me when I was talking about these strategies that I was coming up and starting to share. He said, "This is very important work." He's like, "Let me tell you, my daughters are still my daughters." He had three daughters. He's like, "But it's different now." And he was 70 years old, fit as a fiddle, still going, still water skiing, incredible guy. And
awesome.
he said, "I'm letting you know this, Jim. You got 18 summers. It's different after that. They're still my kids, but once you start to go off in that adult direction of their own career, their own college, their own military, whatever it is," he says, it starts to change. He says, take hold of those first 18 summers. And then there was actually a study, I think it was the Heath brothers authors, that it showed almost 85% of the average person, almost 85% of the quality time they'll ever have with their children is by the end of the 18th summer. And when you think about that, that's pretty profound. And it makes sense because they're going off, they're doing, your 5-year-old's hanging out with you more than your 25-year-old. And so the good news is, guys, that's not to like sink you. It's the 18 summers is a positive motivator. Wow. Because I know when I learned that, I said, wow, my oldest boys, they were 7 and 5. I was like, wait a minute, 11, that's all I have left. That's not a big number. 11, that's it. And so it's a positive motivator. And I believe the key word there was average. The average person will have spent about 85% of the quality time they ever get. I think when you get intentional and you have simple little principles like this to put to use, well, you can totally beat the averages, right? You could have 20, 25, 35, 40% more time with your kids if you're that intentional with what we're talking about. But again, you got to have intentional, you got to have a game plan.
Agreed. Hey, listen, I'm still caught up on these principles. I'm sorry, guys, but because it, like, family is everything, right? Especially your home base. And when home base, I have noticed when home base is set at a level of being, I'm gonna just use the word okay, right? You know, you thrive as a person,
Yeah.
and life changes for you. Like, and I can't stress that enough to everyone. So, life changes, and everybody always, you got so many people that's so miserable these days,
Yeah. You're
right?
right.
And it's like, okay, you're miserable. Like, here's three principles right here that I guarantee that will change but you got to believe it, and you got to do the work too. Like, listen to what Jim said. Jim said, if we have one slot on Wednesday at 8:30, right? That's a non-negotiable slot because he and his wife are going on a date night, regardless to what's going on and what's happening, and that's Jim ensuring that he's putting in the work to make sure that these things happen. And I just want people to understand that, yes, it's great to say them. Yes, it's great to, even hanging on your little vision board or anything like that, right? But the whole important part to all this is, did you set up the quarterly times throughout the year, right? With your kids, the one-on-one time, which I think is super fantastic. Did you set the date night? And Jim, please help out here because everyone pocketbook is not the same. So everyone's not going to be able to sit here and have a babysitter, once a week. And Jim, tell them some other things that they can do, like because the first thing someone's going to sit there and say is excuse, right? That's the new thing. Everybody got, well, Jim got 3 companies and Jim can afford this X Y
You're right.
Z. Okay, so Jim, for all the individuals who's going to use this money excuse, help them out.
Well, here's one thing I know. If you have neighborhood friends who have same interests, then people have read my book and shared it. And let's say, you don't have to go to a 5-star dinner, but you say, well, even the babysitter's tough. Great. You swap off with each other. Hey, bring the kids over. We're going to go for a coffee and a walk for, an hour or two. Is that okay? You can find hopefully some sort of support of people that could do that. And again, this doesn't have to be a 5-star event. Again, for the children as well, Lenny. Everyone's, oh, they're gonna want to go to this big expensive thing. I've had days that were literally free, except for like, some nasty fast food I let them pick for that day because they get to pick the meal too. And I'm like,
Right.
dang it. I try to pride myself on eating healthy now, but hey, I'm not making the decision today. It's yes day. So, yeah. So really, we let money get in the way more of our fears. Like, well, I'm not going to be able to afford some extravagant thing. I can't afford the babysitter. Well, great. Then get resourceful. Have a family, a friend family that you can swap with. Hey, you do date night Tuesday night. We'll do it Wednesday night. Bring the kids over. We'll swap back and forth. How's that sound? That's an easy way to save on that. And then you don't have, again, going for just a simple coffee or a walk without the phone is not very expensive. And going to the beach for me here, that's free where I live in Florida. If one of my kids want to do that, and we've had plenty of free days. Yeah, I've done some bigger ones with my kids, but it doesn't have to be like that. And so don't put yourself out to say, well, I can't afford some big date night every week or every 90 days do some huge colossal thing with my kid. That's not what they're looking for. It's not usually the big event. It's getting to spend the time with you, and that's pretty reassuring whether the wallet is big or not.
No, yeah, that's super powerful. So with the summers, like if somebody wants to plan these summers out, like what are some like tips, or even like how early and how frequent, like what are some like just suggestions on like somebody being effective with actually like making the best use of their time.
So when it comes to the actual summertime, again, I love to plan an adventure. If you're on a limited budget, then plan a limited budget adventure, but plan it as a family. So like this year, we've gotten to ourselves where we can do some things. We're taking 12 family members back to Ireland, where I'm from, to see some of my remaining relatives there, reviewing my now vows with my wife. It's a big adventure. We're excited. We've worked hard for that, but it might be something more localized. In plan an adventure. And if you want this summer to slow down, if you want to start to feel like a kid again, then I really think you need to look at principle number 2. You got to look at principle number 2, that intermittent tech fasting. The summer will blow you by, and you're all of a sudden going to go, dang it, it's Labor Day.
Yep.
And I had a lot more opportunities. So I'm in my little office, guys. You don't know it. I have my own. I don't want an office at our company. I wanted a little office in the corner of my yard, right? I can
Mhm.
walk to my house in 7 seconds. I can walk to the ocean in another 7
Oh,
seconds.
that's awesome.
And that's how I wanted to be. My phone for this summer, although it's here, it's off, is not allowed in my house. I'm not even going to bring it in my house.
Wow.
I told my wife I'm not bringing it in. I said I don't want it to become like I'm not a smoker. I never have been. I don't want to be like a cigarette smoker. Oh, I get up,
Mm.
have a cigarette. Yeah, I go down for breakfast, have a cigarette. And I'm not even allowing my phone in the house. So what I think, Amit, is look at how much you're onto that.
Mhm.
Try some of this fasting. Like the day's over, you can't do much more. Turn off your phone where you're not looking at some useless news or
Yep.
Instagram thing, and be
Yep.
with the people right in front of you for 2 hours without this sudden check. We if you don't want, like, I had a friend who used to come home from work and he'd put it in a gun safe. A little gun
Wow.
safe. Because then if he got the urge, he would have to go through the combo and stuff, and he'd be like, ah, forget it. It's too much to get to it.
Too much
So,
to do.
so to slow it down for the summer, try to plan an adventure and base it around your budget. Yeah. And again, some of your people are in real estate. If you've worked hard and you've created some financial resource for yourself, first off, awesome. Like you've probably done better than a generation before you. I know I have. Man, enjoy some of that. It's not about being the richest man in the graveyard, right? And I'm not telling you to blow your money or do
Right.
that. I'm not a fancy car or Rolex guy, but I want to have adventures with my family. Think about spending an adventure. Think about that 18 summers principle. And then if you plan that adventure, don't go and sit on your phone the whole time, right? We're seeing this epidemic occurring. It's like chain smokers. And we miss what's right in front of us. So that's my best advice, Amid. Put these three to work. Obviously, schedule one-on-one time, but start to get like summer hours. Like, hey, I'm not going to be available to check email for 2 hours at the end of the day, and make it playtime. Go back to being a kid. That's free. It's funny. I did a whole list of everything that's free that I can do with my kids, and a lot of
Wow.
that's even better than stuff I could pay to do. Playing in our cul-de-sac, playing in our pool, like all these don't cost anything. Playing a game with them, riding skateboards up and down the hill, going to the beach. These don't cost any money for where I live, right? I'm talking about play in my own backyard, and it's not like my kids are like, oh gosh, why didn't we go out for Flamin' Young and a thing? They wouldn't even know. They'd be like, what? No, we just want to play like on the trampoline, and so anyway. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that helps tremendously. I mean, you know, um, you know, a list of free things to do, like that is gold.
Yeah,
Honestly speaking, it really is. I know Omi does some things with his kids every morning, right? So every morning they got a routine that they do every morning. My son, he likes to throw the football, so I just go outside and throw the football with him until the lights get dark, right? you know, and an additional thing that we do, which I tell people that you should do this as well, is so we have a map on my son's wall, right?
mm-hmm.
And what we do is we circle two markers, red and blue. We circle with blue all the places we have been, right? So you'll
Nice.
know where you're going.
Yeah, yeah.
And then with the red marker, I say, where would you like to go? So, he watches TV. He got friends in school that talk about trips and stuff like that. And I say, be in tune to these things. And then we're circling in red. So now when we plan our family vacations throughout the year, he has an input on the family vacation because we say, hey, oh, okay, cool. You know what? He want to go to Orlando, right? So let's make sure that we, put that on. Like he's really big on this icon ship,
I love
right?
that.
That just
Yeah, yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're familiar with it, right? Is that it just docked, and so we have to put that, to play. So I'm big on trying to get him involved in family planning, and we consider him as well, and so I'm gonna tell you, Jim. At the end of the day, man, we didn't even get into the real estate side of Jim. And the real estate side of Jim is just as good as what we just was talking about today. But so Jim, if you can, man, on air live right now, promise us that you are going to come back for part two because we had to get out the 18 summers, we had to get out these three principles because truth be told is the real estate is great, but being a great human is the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I think with these three principles are just three steps to add to your life to be the best human. So promise us you're coming back.
I'll be back, guys. No worries.
All right, my man. So I've got a question for you. What does find your freedom mean to you?
Find your freedom to me, we kind of hit on it before. It's the how, meaning how am I able to live? So I can have a ton of money, but I'm stressed to the gills. I'm working before sunrise to after sunset, right? And the bank accounts adding up, but my health is deteriorating, my relationships are going. That's not finding your freedom to me. That's imprisonment. The same thing of like, hey man, I got no responsibilities. I can do whatever I want. I don't. But I don't have a roof over my head because I'm flat broke. I'm kind of destitute because I don't do anything. I haven't taken care of my. Those are the two far sides, right? I like to be somewhere in the middle, where I've been able to provide financial resource to buy back my time, create the best family life that I can, be able to give to causes I care about, not just financially but also with my time, continue my hobbies. So people say, when are you going to retire? I'm going to say, well, if I'm able to surf and go on family adventures and take trips to service projects in third world countries still, and do I'm able to do all these things, well, then I'm not going to. Now, if work starts to become too much and I'm missing those things, or, hey, I've just given up everything, I'm not paying attention to my investments, I can't afford to do any of these things anymore. It's the how am I able to live? And that, when I'm in the positive how of that balance, like I just described, where I can fund the adventures and enjoy them and have time with my family, and to give to causes I care about. That's what it means to me. Kind of that zone in between. That's what I aim for.
You're speaking my language. I mean, language, adventure, spending time with family, and to your point, like, it. I feel like it gives you longevity with regards to like enthusiasm for life, enthusiasm for things you enjoy, and I think that's so important. And kind of like Lenny said, I want to echo this. I would say, like, if we had a two-part series to this podcast, the first one would be really just like, how can you really solidify like the relationships around you? And then part two is really the financial component of it, which is like the real estate piece. So we definitely want to have that, second part with you. So I guess just, in the meantime, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can, if you're interested in more about our 18 Summers principles and books, just go to 18summers.com. And we'll talk another time about the JJ playbook. That's kind of our financial playbook that allows us to buy back our time and have what, we've set out to have a legendary family life. That was our goal. And we talk about some of the principles we've followed to make that happen.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, so this is the time where, we're going to come and I'm prepping the audience here to turn down your speakers because we have this big boom session. All right, so Jim, how it goes is I'm gonna count to three, 1, 2, 3, and all three of us going to say boom as loud as we can. We're gonna hold it as long as we can. All right, y'all down with that? All
Let's do
right.
it.
For all the individuals who can't see this, they're saying, let's do it. All right. So 1, 2, 3. Boom! Awesome, 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 awesome. Check this out. Listen, this was not one of our typical episodes here at Find Your Freedom. However, this was probably one of the best episodes at Find Your Freedom. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because truthfully, it's all about being the right person. And with these three principles are the three steps that you should 100% incorporate in your life. And I'm not talking about incorporate them tomorrow. I'm talking about stop what you're doing now and make sure that you write them down. And if you have to rewind this episode, if you're listening or if you're watching, rewind it to that part, really dial in on what Jim is truly explaining and understand that it don't have to be just that, but it has to make sure that you follow those principles. Don't have to be anything extravagant. It just, you spend time with your significant other, you spend time with your family, and those are the principles there that you want to make sure that you incorporate in your life. And also check his podcast out, 18 Summers. He got a book. Make sure you purchase it called Family Board Meeting. Go out and get it. I'm sure that I'm going to go out and get the book, and make sure that you get it and leave some comments. So another thing we need you to listen to this episode and leave an honest 5-star review. That's the way that we can bring back Jim, bring back other individuals who can just provide much more value in your life to take you from 0 to 5 to 100. All right. And with that being said, make sure you share this episode. Share this episode with your friends, your mother, your sister, your brother, your cousin, your aunt, your uncle. Share it with all your coworkers, the ones that you like and the ones that you don't like. Now, until the next episode of Find Your Freedom, we talk to you soon. Peace.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to Find Your Freedom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, please help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review and sharing the podcast with friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, get out there and find your freedom.